There's lots of stories that I'm sure are passed down in your families from generation to generation. Maybe they're true, maybe they're apocryphal. This one's been passed down in my family for 60 years. It's a story about my dad, Rabbi Stephen Lerner, may his memory be for a blessing. And he spent a year studying in rabbinical school in Jerusalem, which is a great thing to do, whether or not you're becoming a rabbi, just a good thing to have a chance to have that experience. This was in the mid-60s, and he befriended one of his professors, Professor Zev Falk, who went on to a very important career as a law professor at Hebrew University, and was also a poet, an amazing person. And he invited him over to the family Seder. And you should know something about Zev, who I actually became close with when I lived in Jerusalem in the 90s. He was born in Breslau, Germany in 1923. And he was able to escape the horrors of the Holocaust just before the war in 1939, immigrating to what was called at the time Palestine, what was about to become Israel. And he was what was called a Yekka. Some people have heard it pronounced Yeki, but it's a Yekka. What is a Yekka? A Jew from Germany. But it's not just that they're from Germany. Right? They're very, very meticulous. Everything has to be done in the exact proper way. Every box checked off. A very formal way of being. And in Zev's case, it was not only the way that he was in his life, but it was part of his Jewish observances. Very carefully, meticulous. And he knew the tradition backwards and forwards. Now, the Seder that my dad was invited to had a lot of discussion. Everyone got into it really intensely, and it went on for hours and hours and hours. Because Zev didn't use, and his family used electricity on Shabbat or on holidays, they had like timers to turn on and off the lights. And at 3:30 in the morning, all the lights went out. Everyone was just sitting there in the dark. Zev calmly took his Haggadah, put it down on the table, and just continued as if nothing happened, reciting the Haggadah by heart. And an hour and a half later, they were finished. Now, I don't recommend this Seder strategy just in case you're looking ahead to plan. I am aware of how ingrained the Seder's texts, its songs, its liturgies, and rituals are that many of us actually could probably do many aspects of the Seder by heart. The central text of the Seder is the opening of this morning's Parashah. It is a mini history of the Jewish people's story from the time of our origins until we arrive in the land of Israel 3,200 years ago. Now, it's interesting that this text, first few verses, was a specific liturgy that you were to recite. Arami oved avi, vayered mitzrayma, vayagor sham b'mitei me'at, vayihi sham legoy gadol atzum v'rav. That's the first part. I'll read it in English. My father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us, and they imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried out to the Eternal, the God of our ancestors, and the Eternal heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. God freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with awesome power and by signs and portents, bringing us to this place and giving us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey, as Ashley and Adam read, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. Now, these verses were part of a ceremony. The Torah says that when you're finally settled in the land, right, they were all farmers, you're to collect your first fruits, put them in a basket, and bring them up to the temple in Jerusalem. Present them to the Kohen, the spiritual leader, the religious officiant, and then recite the text that I just read to you. And so this is a fixed liturgy. You were supposed to say the words exactly. And it's very unique because it's the only case in the Torah where we're given the words of what we're supposed to say. It's quite unusual. Normally, you just simply speak from the heart. Anything you want to say, any prayer you want to offer. Now, there's a few questions that come to mind about this text. First of all, when was this moment of bringing the first fruits? I'll give you a hint. It's not what I should be doing now or thinking about now, which is preparing for Rosh Hashanah. It's not that. When is it? Right, this is Shavuot, the least well but best holiday that we have, which comes 7 weeks after Pesach. You were supposed to go up on that holiday, and it's called Chag HaBikurim, because in Israel, the first fruits ripen around that time of the year in the spring. Now, this concise history, therefore, was not meant for Pesach and your Haggadah, but was meant for bringing your fruits on Shavuot. So our second question has to be, why? What happened? We discussed this in my Parashah class on Tuesday. Why did it get moved to the second place from Shavuot to Pesach? So what? So you could count the Omer. There you go. The rabbis loved this text. And what happened was, after the destruction of the temple in the year 70 of the Common Era, there was no temple to bring your basket of fruits to anymore. And so the ritual stopped. And the rabbis said, you know what? We can't lose this text. They loved it. It's our origin story. It's the journey that took our ancient ancestors down from Israel to Egypt, from enslavement and our suffering all the way down to redemption. This is an amazing story. It's unbelievable that this could have actually happened. And they liked how it was just a few verses that encapsulated all of it until we returned to the land of Israel. Now, the ritual was pretty much done, and they said, how are we going to preserve it? And they found the perfect place. What could be better than the Pesach Seder? This is when we all gather. This is when we eat together. And it says in the Torah that on Pesach, that you should remember the Exodus on that very night, the anniversary when we left Pesach. Here's going to be the way we're going to do it. We'll give you a short synopsis. Say this like we did on Shavuot. And of course, the truth is, it worked. We're sitting here 2,000 years later. Arami Oved Avi Vayered Mitzrayim. Right when we hear those words, we think it's the Seder. It was a very powerful move, and here we are. Which brings me to the next question. The next question is, why did every Israelite have to come up and recite the same exact formula? Maybe one could have said the mini history a little bit differently. Why the same text? This was a powerful statement about the Israelites' values. Everyone was equal, rich or poor, everyone gave the same speech. The rabbis teach that the words, these exact words, were so crucial that there was a prompter whose job it was to stand there, and if you forgot a word, they would fill it in. And they would tell you, here's the text, and you would repeat it after them. And this brings me to the final and most important question that I want to ask this morning. Let's think about the people who were given this tradition. They were all farmers, and think about anyone here a farmer? Okay, just Rabbi Willis. Okay, so maybe I should just be asking you this question. What's the feeling that you have after your crop comes in, you have some beautiful tomatoes and other produce or fruit? It's an amazing feeling. So if you were bringing your fruit to Temple Emunah to feed us at Kiddush, you would bring them and you would feel proud and happy. And that's what the Israelites felt. They were proud, they were happy, they were filled with gratitude, right? They were filled with a sense of thanksgiving. And so you would expect them to say, how grateful am I? I'm so excited to be here. I've got this basket of fruit. This is a great moment. And instead they launch into this mini history about Judaism. It's a little bit like a mood shifter. Why? Why is this central moment, this key occasion of feeling blessed and grateful, which is of course implicit in bringing any gift, become about remembering our story as Jews? We are commanded over and over again to remember our past. We're a people that live in memory. Zachor, remember, is a Leitwort, a word that repeats throughout the tradition. Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'Kodsho. Remember the Shabbat. Zachor, remember that you were a slave in Egypt. Zachor et Asher Asah Lecha Amalek. Remember what the Amalekites did to you. Remember the destruction of the temple. Remember the Holocaust. Zachor. Yosef Yerushalmi, the great historian, writes a book entitled Zachor. And he writes, quote, "The mandate to remember is unconditional, regardless of the problematic character of a memory, and it points to the role of memory in the survival of a people in the global diaspora. Memory in Judaism is not a metaphor, but an actual social experience sustained and transmitted by conscious collective efforts. To remember is implanted in how we act. Right? That's what Pesach is. The memories are embedded in the rituals. And that's, of course, what this original ritual was. Memory, knowing our history, roots us in time. It explains how we got here and helps us, of course, think about us charting a course for the future. Our origin narrative describes a lowly people, slaves. So we learn how to treat those who are lowly, the stranger, the poor. It informs us how we are to treat immigrants, since over and over again it says we were immigrants. And so we still recite these exact words, maybe on Pesach and not on Shavuot, but we know that telling this story over and over again teaches us how to act today. Shabbat Shalom.